if you were to look back 3 to 5 years from now and say that this coaching conversation with me today changed everything for you, what would need to happen?
Someone told me recently, like, in anything in life, like, there's lots of ups and downs, but like the worst thing is for you to quit. So I guess for today to look back on it like 3 to 5 years ago or 3 to 5 years from now would be to say like I didn't quit, if that makes sense. Like it changed everything by the fact that I'm not quitting. Like it was encouraging conversation, if that makes sense.
100%. Yeah, sometimes the best thing you can do is just take action.
Yeah.
The horse, you get back on. I know you've been going through some ups and downs in general, but you're back on the wagon. You came to the coaching call. You're back on track with the new schedule.
Yeah.
How's everything coming along for you working through that schedule right now?
It's been great. So since we've talked with the mastermind thing, like I got some whiteboards, and just the fact of like putting it out in front of my face all the time has like really helped me accomplish more than I have ever in the past, if that makes sense. Like not that I didn't learn anything from before, but I think just having, I guess, the whole goals and like seeing everything in front of my face all the time now. And also like putting a lot of like my note cards like in my bathroom or places, like that has really helped, like, I guess, make bigger progress. So I appreciate that. So that's been good. I've gotten a lot more accomplished is what I'm trying to say.
That's great. That's great to hear. So you're using the study plan?
I'm using the study plan. Yeah, it's just cause like the study plan would be on like my computer and I could like easily close it and like forget about it or like ignore it, or you just don't see how it like how it in the big picture. But like now having the big picture around me all the time, like I can easily check things off so much more faster than I have ever. Yeah. So and it's making, I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Well, that's fantastic. So you're using the whiteboard, you're using the study plan, you're using the courses. Mm-hmm. Where are you at right now? What are you working on?
So I am using the study plan, but I'm kind of like at a weird spot. Like I'm kind of going back since our last class for mastermind and going back over some stuff right now. I kind of did a week, but it was really hazy and I didn't do it very well. So I'm doing that week again because it's a lot of foundational stuff, which is necessary, sufficient, and weaken and strengthen, that kind of thing. I kind of just like went over it really fast, but those are like so important. So I'm kind of in this big day of like trying to going over that stuff. I've been using your courses, trying to figure some pieces back in. So I'm kind of like on this weird day, if that makes sense, kind of a long progress day, kind of going back, and trying to get those a little stronger. I'm trying to connect some things. Cause like you said, like you can do lots and lots of problems, but like if it's not clicking somewhere, that's what I'm trying to go back and find the spots that are not clicking right now with reading. So if that makes sense.
Sure. And I know one of the questions you had for me was about sufficient assumptions in predicting the answers, about logical reasoning. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess I know this is like a really big complaint for lots of people. It's just kind of the whole inference thing. Like, I guess that just comes with practice or something. I don't know. I just feel like when I am looking at these questions, I can see how logic games and logic reasoning like connect. I see that now. Because like a lot of the concepts, a lot of how you think, is the exact same way. It's just in words now, and it's not, that clicked. But like, I guess what I struggled with games is what I'm struggling with logic reasoning now is that inference of like taking the time and just like thinking, because it'll be like, I'll make my diagrams and then I just, for some reason, can't make those gaps. I don't know. It just kind of crashes through. And then like, obviously when I look back at your answers, I'm like, oh, that makes sense how that was the gap. But like, for me, it's just like that gap is not, I don't know, sticking, if that makes sense. Like I'm not being able to find it first. And I know that you should be able to, in your brain, read it first so you don't get lost in all the answers. But I'm just, I guess for me, like that's been the hard part, is the whole inference thing has been really like, at least insufficient, not necessarily necessary. I've gotten pretty good on that, but like sufficient, I'm just like crashing because it's new information question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And sufficient assumption questions, they are one of those formal logic types that do relate back to logic games, where it actually is worth diagramming them.
Yeah.
To see those patterns.
And so like if you have lots of, so when I see like my necessary assumptions and then I find my sufficient, and there are lots of different sufficient assumptions, is that where like what I'm missing there is that I'm not seeing like, do I just pick one of them? Because not, I guess that doesn't make sense. So if there's 3 sentences and 1 and 2 have different sufficient assumptions, and then obviously the conclusion has its necessary, am I supposed to just pick 1 of 2 and go with it? Does that make sense? That didn't make sense at all. I'm just trying to figure this out in my brain of like,
Yeah, sure.
which sufficient am I supposed to link to the conclusion, if that makes sense?
Well, here's how they really work. So you've got in the stimulus, you have evidence and conclusion, but the evidence is not fully justifying the conclusion. So you need new information in the form of the sufficient assumption that when combined with the evidence will guarantee the conclusion 100%. That's what you're looking for. So it's like if you had 1 plus X equals 3, what is X? Mm-hmm. X is that new information when combined with 1 would equal 3, which is of course 2. So in the stimulus, you don't have any sufficient assumptions there already. What you have there are different pieces of evidence. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of sufficient assumption questions, you actually have multiple conditional statements, which is what makes it more complicated at first.
Yeah, I guess that's, yeah, no, I understand. That's where I struggle is with lots of conditional statements, and I'm like, oh, dang it. But so it's like, I guess it is improving, but I just know that for me, that is where I'm falling. It's kind of just like, I guess with necessary assumption, it's like, oh, great. You know, like I don't have to think of new things. You know, it's like the risk taker in me is like, I don't want to take that risk. I just want to do all the questions that I can figure out, all of like the local questions. And then like the global, I'm just like, oh shoot, I have to like push myself out there. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So that's just something I guess that takes time to push yourself forward. And I don't know.
Well, here's my recommendation for you, Jocelyn. As you're getting back on the wagon, as you're attacking this exam, I have videos inside the course on sufficient assumptions, and I have a big list of sufficient assumptions broken down by their exact formula, the underlying formula that will help you crack them open. Mm-hmm. So what I want you to do is take the next couple of days, just work through a couple of dozen of them using the formulas. Mm-hmm. Practice diagramming them so you can see the underlying logic. Mm-hmm. And that'll give you the momentum to see, I can do this question type. I do know how to diagram it, and it'll keep you pushing forward.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome. Now, I know you had some other questions for me as well, and I want to make sure we cover everything that's important for you. So you were asking about question types, working on a question type before learning everything about it.
Yeah. I guess that it's like, at least in your schedules, it's very much like read all of this, watch this, and then do 30 or 20, whatever. I guess for me, it's like, I don't know if my perfectionism is coming out where it's like, oh, I don't understand this completely, so I just like shouldn't even go there. You know, because some days I'll have all day to be like, let's read everything. And then some days it's like life happens and then you have only a couple minutes or hours to read all that stuff. And then you should try to do as many problems as possible. Should you just attempt all of those problem types when you have a gist of it? Or should you really like understand, like have a really good head knowledge before you start doing the problem sets? That's what I'm trying to, it was very confusingly worded. But does that make sense? Like, because some days I don't have like the 2-3 hours to like sit there and like soak up everything. But should I just continue to do problem sets because that's where I'm learning? The more practice, if that makes sense, the more exposure.
Practice is good, but theory comes before practice.
Yeah.
So maybe some days, instead of doing 30 problems of that type, what if you were to do a bit more reading on the theory and then do only 15 problems that day or 10 problems that day and then do a bit more tomorrow?
Okay. I guess that's what I was just asking. Like, if you just recommend just like hitting it, just getting the gist and going for it, or actually like getting that theory really soaked in and then going, because it is kind of, because it's just frustrating sometimes of like how much you can handle, I guess, your brain. And sometimes and how much time you have is that weird balance, if that makes sense. Like,
sure. No, it's a balance, and we have real life to contend with. It's not like you want to spend 5 years studying for this, right?
Yeah.
So choose the source for theory that you like best. And of course, you can read chapters in a book. You can read the bite-sized articles on my site. You can watch the videos in the course. Pick whichever you like best and whichever you have the time for. Then do some problems. And then if you need more, then go back and read the other sources or watch the other sources that you haven't already looked at.
Yeah. Okay.
If you need it. But you won't always need to read every source for every single question type.
Right. Of course. That answers my question. And then my last question is, obviously looking with the digital LSAT, like I know you have lots of like tips of like how to like prepare yourself, train yourself, you know. My thing that I'm running into is when I'm doing questions, like let's say I'm doing a whole section of logic games, would you, because like we're dealing obviously with the iPad on the side and then our book, would you like have one like write in permanent marker, like have like a little ABCD and then just continually erase it and then ABCD kind of thing? Or would you on each problem go ABCD? I guess this is what I'm trying to do as I'm about to get really close into doing full sections, like how to practice with the iPad feel / because it's before you could write in the book, you could cross out, but now it's like that split. There's a wall there, I guess.
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
I totally know what you mean. The digital LSAT does have an ability to cross off on the tablet.
Yeah.
And when you cross off on the tablet, it grays out that text a little bit, like it de-emphasizes it.
Mm-hmm.
And also you can collapse answer choices as well if the text is going beyond the space on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest using that if it works for you, because otherwise you run the risk of doing a lot of erasing. Let's say I could imagine that you wrote A, B, C, D, E in pen and then erase it in pencil, erase your markings in pencil after you make them, or you're writing A, B, C, D, E 100 times for the 100 approximate questions on the exam itself.
Yeah. So you're saying do the second in pen, continue.
Well, that was how I interpreted your question, right?
Yeah.
Like you could do it that way, but I don't love the idea of you spending lots of time erasing for every single question. I also wouldn't want you to write out A, B, C, D, E 100 times for all the questions on the exam.
Yeah.
So if you can get used to it, I would suggest crossing off on the tablet itself.
If like for the actual like handbook tests, like these, would you just continue to still cross off in these? I guess like pretending like if it was the tablet, just not working on it?
I think it's fine to cross off on the book for now.
On the book for now.
So on the book for now, I wouldn't draw any diagrams in the book or do any markings on the questions themselves because you can't do that on the digital LSAT. But since you can eliminate choices on the tablet itself, I'm okay with you crossing off on your books for now.
Okay, good. Because like that's just something that I've been running into. I've been either erasing a lot and like kind of getting confused, or like then writing A, B, C, D, E like 100 times when I'm doing these sections, and I'm like, oh, there's got to be a more efficient way to do this and practice like if I did have a digital kind of thing. So
yeah, just do it in the book or do it on a bubble sheet. Ideally, I'd say the book is better if you can, but I don't want you to spend all day erasing everything.
Okay.
And then also practice on the digital LSAT familiarization tool as well, so you can see exactly what crossing off on there is like.
Yeah. Cool. That's kind of just something that I figured you had a better way than my non-effective way. So.
Just try out different things and see what works for you. It's a process.
That's it. So.
Well, Jocelyn, this has been awesome. What would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
That theory matters, and so it's okay if it takes a second to do. Like you don't have to you can cut down on problems because theory matters. Obviously, more problems and theory would be great, but if time constraints, theory really does matter.
So what I love about Steve in general and the LSAT blog website and all that is Steve is very much a holistic approach to prep test studying, which is awesome because like big prep test companies, they're more like traditional medicine where it's like here's a band-aid and an antibiotic, but Steve is very much holistic where he kind of looks as a person as an individual and sees everything around them. Like he understands that anxiety, work, depression, family, extracurricular, school, whatever, anything that's going on there, how you're handling it, whatever bad habits you're dragging around, it will affect how you're performing as on the test as a whole. And he doesn't just push that away or judge you or whatever. You can admit, you're struggling in these areas, and he totally has tools and wants to see you succeed, and he really does help you and help you keep going forward. And so I signed up for the Supreme level, and I was doing that for a while, kind of chipping at it. And then I got invited to be on the mastermind group, and so I really thought like, oh, this is the next step of my prep test journey, and that's why I went for it. And so I've been working in this kind of big setting, chipping away at all the stuff that he's given, the schedules, I bought the guides and different, like, his explanations, which are great. I love how he explains things, not like how forums do. And now, it's getting that part of my journey of like, let's, target some areas, let's get into a smaller group, let's get that concentrated help, accountability through the Facebook group, whatever, reporting to Steve. That's kind of why I've signed up for the mastermind, because it's like that next level in my journey. And so that's why I signed up for mastermind. And so now, like Steve always says that like studying for the LSAT is a marathon, not a sprint. And I totally get that. I have run some half marathons myself. And so I know personally, like, not every mile is the same. Some miles are like, awesome, I've got this. And some miles you've got like a cramp and you're dying. Or some miles you need to refuel, you got to switch it up or whatever. But Steve is there for every good and every bad mile, and he's totally not judgmental, and he's going to make sure that, one foot in front of the other keeps going, very much like a coach. And so I really love that, because it's all holistic. He sees the person and just helps you out, like, just really encouraging, really great website information and programs. And so, yeah, that's my experience.